I spent 20 years thinking fast harvest meant cutting corners. My dad used to say if you want something quick in the garden, go buy it at the grocery store. And for a long time, I believed him. But then I actually sat down and did the math, and I realized there are at least 10 legitimate crops you can take from seed to something on your plate in roughly 21 days. 3 weeks. That is not a gimmick. That is just how certain plants are built. And today I'm walking you through every single one of them with the exact varieties, the specific conditions, and the honest truth about what 21 days really means versus what the seed packet wants you to believe. Now, I saved the best for last on this list, and I mean that. The final crop I'm going to share with you is the one that genuinely changed how I think about succession planting and year-round harvest after decades of doing it the hard way. And if you stick around past the main list, I have got a bonus technique for you, a little trick I stumbled onto about 3 years ago that can shave 2 to 3 days off germination for almost any fast crop. It is dead simple, costs nothing, and I wish I had known about it 40 years ago. So let me set the stage here. The reason these particular crops can go from seed to harvest that quickly comes down to basic plant biology. These are plants that put nearly all of their energy into leaf and stem growth rather than fruiting. They're not trying to flower, set fruit, and ripen. They're just growing green tissue as fast as they possibly can, and that is exactly what we want to eat. My father understood this instinctively, even if he never would have explained it that way. He always had a patch of something green ready to cut within a few weeks of planting, every single spring, and honestly, right through fall too. It took me longer than I care to admit to realize he was not just lucky. He was choosing the right crops for speed and eating them at the right stage. Once I understood that principle, everything clicked. So here's what actually works, starting with the one crop I think every gardener should have in the ground right now. The first one I want to talk about is radishes, and I know that sounds obvious, but hear me out because most people still get radishes wrong. I got them wrong for years. I would plant them, forget about them for a month, and then pull up woody, cracked, pithy little roots that tasted like spicy sawdust. The secret with radishes is not just planting them, it is pulling them on time. Cherry Belle is the variety I come back to every single season. You sow the seeds a ½ inch deep, about 1 inch apart, and in warm soil, say 65 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit, you will see germination in 3 to 4 days. By day 18 to 21, you have got a radish ready to pull. But here's the critical part. If you leave them in the ground even 4 or 5 days past prime, they go downhill fast. The texture turns spongy, the flavor gets bitter, and you have wasted a perfectly good 3-week crop. So mark your calendar, I am serious. The day you sow, write down the date 3 weeks out and start checking. My dad never used a calendar for this, he just knew. I'm not that gifted, so I write it down. Now radishes are roots, but the next crop that comes in just as fast works entirely above ground. And it is one I honestly overlooked for the first 15 years of my gardening life. I'm talking about microgreens, and specifically sunflower microgreens grown right in a shallow tray. You take black oil sunflower seeds, the same ones you would buy for bird feed, honestly, soak them for 8 to 12 hours, spread them dense on about 1 inch of moistened potting mix in a standard 10 by 20 tray, cover them for 3 to 4 days to let them germinate in the dark, and then move them into light. By day 10 to 14, you have got these gorgeous, thick, nutty tasting greens that are packed with nutrition. I resisted microgreens for years because I thought they were some trendy restaurant nonsense. I was wrong. They are legitimate food, and you can grow a full tray on a kitchen counter with no garden bed at all. The key measurement here is seed density. You want roughly 1 ounce of dry sunflower seeds per standard tray. Too thin, and you get leggy, floppy greens. Too thick, and you get mold. 1 ounce per tray. That is the sweet spot I landed on after ruining about 6 trays figuring it out. Speaking of things that grow fast indoors or out, This next one is the crop that finally convinced my wife that my constant planting was not just a hobby, but was actually useful. Arugula. And not just any arugula. Astro arugula. This variety was bred specifically for speed. You direct sow at 1/4 inch deep, keep the soil consistently moist, and in soil temperatures around 60 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, you will have baby arugula leaves ready to cut in as little as 21 days. Now I want to be straight with you. 21 days gets you baby leaves, not full mature plants. But baby arugula is what you actually want anyway. It is tender, peppery, and perfect for salads. Once it matures and bolts, it turns bitter and tough. So again, timing is everything. Cut it young, cut it often, and you will get multiple harvests from one sowing because arugula will keep pushing out new leaves after you cut it back to about 2 inches above the soil line. That right there is what makes it one of the most productive, fast crops you can grow. If you are finding this useful so far, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. I put out straightforward gardening advice like this every week. No fluff, no gimmicks, just what actually works. All right, let us keep going because some of the best ones are still coming. Now this next crop pairs beautifully with that arugula, and it is one I think a lot of gardeners skip because they just do not realize how fast it actually grows. I'm talking about leaf lettuce, specifically a variety called black-seeded Simpson. My dad grew this variety, his dad grew this variety. It has been around since the 1800s, and there's a good reason for that. It just works. You sow the seeds barely covered, maybe 1/8 of an inch of soil, because lettuce seeds need light to germinate. Keep them moist, keep the soil around 60 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit, and you will have baby lettuce leaves ready to harvest in roughly 20 to 25 days. Now that puts it right on the edge of our 21-day window, and I will be honest about that. In ideal conditions, you can hit day 21. In cooler weather, it might take 25. But the flavor and the sheer volume of greens you get from one row of black-seeded Simpson makes it worth every single day. I direct sow it in a band about 3 inches wide and just scatter the seeds lightly. No need to thin at the baby leaf stage, you just cut to what you need with scissors about 1 inch above the soil and let it regrow. Here's one that took me completely by surprise the first time I tried it, and now I plant it constantly. Cress, also called garden cress, or sometimes peppergrass. This little plant germinates faster than almost anything I have ever grown. I am talking 2 to 3 days from seed to sprout, and full harvest of those spicy, tangy little leaves in 14 to 17 days. That is not a typo. 2 weeks. You can grow cress on a damp paper towel on your kitchen counter, though I prefer a thin layer of potting mix in a shallow container. Curly cress is the variety I use most often, and you just broadcast the seeds on the surface, press them in gently, mist them, and keep them in bright, indirect light. The flavor is sharp and peppery, almost like a cross between watercress and mustard. It is fantastic on sandwiches and in salads. The whole point here is that cress does not need your best garden real estate. It does not need full sun. It does not need deep soil. It just needs moisture and a few days of patience. Now let me shift gears to something with a little more substance to it, because not every fast crop has to be a delicate little green. Turnips, specifically the Hakurei turnip, are a genuine 21-day crop if you're harvesting them at the baby stage. And baby Hakurei turnips are, in my honest opinion, one of the most underrated vegetables in the entire garden. They are sweet, crisp, juicy, almost like a mild apple when you eat them raw. Sow the seeds 1/2 inch deep, about 2 inches apart, in soil that is around 50 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit. They actually prefer cooler conditions, which makes them perfect for early spring or fall planting. At 21 days, you will have turnips about the size of a golf ball, and that is exactly when you want to pull them. Let them get bigger, and they start to turn woody and lose that sweetness. I ignored turnips for most of my gardening career because the ones I remembered from childhood were bitter, fibrous things my grandmother boiled to death. Hackeray turnips are a completely different animal. If you have not tried them, you owe it to yourself. This next one is so simple, it almost feels like cheating, but it absolutely counts, and I grow it year-round. Green onion tops from sets. Now, I am not talking about growing a full bulb onion here. I am talking about taking onion sets. Those little dry bulbs you can buy by the bag at any garden center, pushing them into moist soil about an inch deep and an inch apart, and harvesting the green tops in roughly 14 to 21 days. You get fresh green onion flavor without waiting months for a full onion to mature. I keep a small container of these going on my back porch at all times. When I need green onions for a recipe, I just walk out and snip. When the tops get cut, they push out new growth. You can get 3 to 4 cuttings from a single set before it gives out. That is about as close to free food as you can get in a garden. And while we are talking about fast alliums, let me sneak in garlic greens right alongside those green onions, because the principle is almost identical, and most people have no idea you can do this. Take a single clove of garlic, any garlic, even a clove from a bulb sitting in your kitchen right now, push it pointy end up into a pot of moist soil about an inch deep, and within 7 to 10 days, you will have a green garlic shoot. By day 21, that shoot will be 6 to 8 inches tall, and you cut it just like a chive. The flavor is mild, fresh garlic. Not the punch of a raw clove, but a beautiful grassy garlic taste that is perfect for eggs, stir fries, soups, you name it. I discovered this by accident when I had some grocery store garlic start sprouting in my pantry, and I thought, well, let me just stick it in some dirt and see what happens. That was maybe 8 years ago, and I've been doing it ever since. All right, this next crop is one that I think more people should be growing, and honestly, it took me reading a study out of the University of Maryland to fully appreciate just how nutritious it is. Broccoli microgreens. Now, we already talked about sunflower microgreens earlier, but broccoli microgreens are in a category by themselves when it comes to nutrition. That University of Maryland study found that broccoli microgreens contain up to 40 times higher levels of certain nutrients compared to mature broccoli. 40 times. You sow them the same way you would sunflower microgreens, in a shallow tray on an inch of potting mix, but broccoli seeds are much smaller, so you need less, roughly 1 tablespoon per 10 by 20 tray. Cover for 3 to 4 days, then move to light. Harvest at day 10 to 14 by cutting just above the soil line. The flavor is mild, slightly peppery, and nothing like mature broccoli. My wife puts them on everything, and I have learned not to argue with her when she is right. Now we're getting into the final stretch here, and I told you at the start that I saved the best for last. But first, let me give you one more crop that deserves a spot on this list because it grows so ridiculously fast that it almost makes you feel like you are doing something wrong. Tatsoi. This is an Asian green, sometimes called spinach mustard, and it forms these beautiful little rosettes of dark green, spoon-shaped leaves. Yucchina Savoy is the variety I grow, and from seed to baby leaf harvest, you are looking at 21 to 25 days. Sow a 1/4 inch deep, 2 inches apart, in soil around 50 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Tatsoi is incredibly cold tolerant, which means you can push your season in both directions. I've grown it under a simple row cover when nighttime temperatures dipped into the upper 20s, and it did not even flinch. The flavor is mild, sort of like a buttery, soft bok choy. Excellent in salads when young, or lightly sautéed when the leaves get a bit bigger. If you have never tried tatsoi, you are missing out on one of the easiest, fastest, and most forgiving greens in the entire seed catalog. And now the one I've been wanting to tell you about since the beginning of this video, the crop that genuinely changed how I think about fast harvests and succession planning after years of overcomplicating it. Pea shoots. Not full sugar snap peas. Not shelling peas. Just the shoots. Here is what happened. About 5 years ago, I was trying to get peas going early in the season, and I had a flat of pea seeds that germinated beautifully, but then got hit by a late frost just as they were sending out their first real tendrils. I was frustrated. I figured the whole tray was a waste. But my neighbor, who is about 80 years old and has been gardening since before I was born, walked over, looked at the tray, and said, "Just eat the shoots." I thought she was joking. She was not. I snipped those little 6-inch pea shoots and tossed them in a salad that night, and I'm telling you, it was one of the best things I'd ever tasted out of my garden. Sweet, tender, with this bright, fresh pea flavor that no mature pea pod can match. Here's the method. Take any shelling pea seed, I use Thomas Laxton, but any variety works. Soak them for 12 to 24 hours. Spread them densely in a tray on about an inch of potting mix, almost seed to seed. Cover them, keep them dark for 3 days, then move to light. By day 14 to 21, you have 6 to 8-inch shoots ready to cut. 1 pound of dry pea seeds will give you about 3 to 4 pounds of pea shoots. You can do the math on that. You're turning a $2 bag of seeds into enough tender greens to feed your family for a week. I now do a succession sowing, starting a new tray every 7 days, and I have fresh pea shoots from late winter through early summer. That one conversation with my neighbor 5 years ago changed my entire approach to early season growing. Sometimes the best gardening advice comes from the person next door, not from the internet. Now, before I share that bonus technique I promise you, let me touch on a few common mistakes I see people make with fast crops, because I've made every single one of them myself. The first mistake is treating 21-day crops like regular garden crops and only planting them once. If you sow radishes one time, you get one harvest, and then you are done. The whole power of these fast crops is succession planting. Sow a new row every 7 to 10 days, and you have a continuous supply instead of a one-time glut. I wasted years getting a big harvest all at once and then having nothing for weeks. The second mistake is letting the soil dry out. Fast-growing crops are pushing growth at a breakneck pace, and they need consistent moisture to do it. I used to water my fast crops the same way I watered my tomatoes, deep and infrequent, and I would get tough, bitter greens every time. These crops want even light, frequent moisture. Think of it like keeping a wrung-out sponge. Moist, never soggy, never dry. The third mistake is planting fast crops in the heat of summer and being surprised when they immediately bolt. Most of these crops, lettuce, arugula, cress, tatsoi, they are cool weather plants. Plant them in spring or fall when temperatures are between 50 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and they will reward you. Plant them in July, and they will go to seed before you even get a harvest. I learned that lesson the hard way with an entire bed of arugula that bolted in about 9 days flat one June. The fourth mistake is overthinking the soil. For fast-growing greens and microgreens, you do not need some elaborate soil recipe. A basic potting mix with decent drainage and a little compost mixed in is more than enough. These plants are not in the ground long enough to care about long-term soil biology. Save your fancy. Amendments for your tomatoes and peppers. All right, now here's that bonus technique I promised you. This one can shave 2 to 3 days off germination for almost any of the crops I just mentioned, and it is something my dad did without ever knowing why it worked. Pre-soak your seeds in room temperature water for 6 to 8 hours before planting. That is it. Not hot water, not some special solution, just plain tap water at room temperature. What this does is soften the seed coat and allow the embryo inside to start hydrating before it even hits the soil. For crops like radishes, peas, and cress, this is especially effective because those seed coats are relatively thick. I ran a little side-by-side test 3 years ago. Same variety of cherry bell radish, same soil, same tray, same temperature. The soaked seeds came up in 2 days. The dry seeds took 4. That 2-day head start carries all the way through to harvest. On a 21-day crop, shaving 2 days off is almost a 10% time savings. My dad used to just dump his pea seeds in a jar of water overnight before planting in the morning. He called it giving them a drink for the road. Turns out he was right, and the science backs it up. So let me ask you this. Which one of these crops are you going to try first? Or maybe you already grow one of them and have a trick of your own. Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and some of the best tips I've ever picked up came straight from folks like you sharing what works in their garden. If you found this helpful, subscribe so you do not miss the next one. I've got more practical, no-nonsense growing advice coming your way. 21 days, that is 3 weeks from seed to plate. There's no reason to wait for a 4-month tomato season when you can be eating out of your garden before the month is out. Get some seeds in the ground this weekend. You will thank yourself in 3 weeks. Happy gardening, and I will see you in the next one, and I will see.